those of you, there's some people in the audience here that have never seen the show, that have been a part of the Maverick over the years, and I have invited them here. And so I want to give a little background of this show, how it happened, how it became my first directorial thing in a community theater. I had done a couple of things in high school and stuff like that, but never taken the leap. And it all kind of starts, and I hope this doesn't go on too long, but I don't care. So, in 1992, I had moved back from San Diego after living down there with a good friend of mine, Joe Hufford, who's in the house tonight somewhere. Chow right over there. And it was during the recession. Yes, for you younger folks, there was another recession back in the 90s when the first Bush was in office. And I was not able to make ends meet like many of us. And I was working over at Troy High School, helping out as a teacher's assistant. And then Jim said, hey, I have a friend. His name's Brian Kojak, and he's starting this theater up at Anaheim, and he needs a resident sound designer. I was like, well, shit, my girlfriend just dumped me. I had nothing better to do. Don't hide over there, Jackson. No, it's okay. Mike, leave him alone. Leave him alone. Get over there. Mike, leave him alone. My kid, I'm happy he's here, but he's got to go to In-N-Out Burger in a few minutes, and so he's got to work. But thank you for coming, Jackson, for a bit. So, but anyways, I met Brian, and he started the Stages thing, and I was a part of that scene and doing all the sound designs. And no one was allowed to drink during the shows, but somehow Brian turned a blind eye to my bottle of tequila while I ran the sound every day. And I always was very appreciative that he trusted me with his shows. And then somewhere after the first season, I was roped into helping advise some sound, I think, for the Crucible. And were you helping? We were a part of that, right? Yeah. I think Gabby was in that as well. And Casey, were you in that too? Yeah.
Erica, Sarah?
Doesn't matter. I was doing the sound design for it, and I was at a point in my life where I was just, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. There was just a lot of heavy stuff going on. I was 28 years old. And just, how we all get to that crossroads, you're not really sure what's happening. Those of you that I grew up with at high school, you know how much I loved cinema. You know how bad I wanted to be a filmmaker. I was making films in high school. I never wanted to do anything else but make pictures. And I never got a break. I tried doing stuff up in LA. Greg, your brother, helped me out and stuff. It never clicked. And I was just really feeling lost. And then one night, maybe a little depressed or whatever, I decided to drink some Schaefer beer and put on the Magnificent Seven. And I proceeded to drink the beer and watch the Magnificent Seven. And I think I probably drank too much, because when I went to sleep, I had this vision that I figured out how to put it on stage. And the next morning I woke up laughing to myself, going, that's ridiculous. Why would I think that? Made a cup of Joe and just out of curiosity put it on and started watching it. And every scene I went, holy shit, I see it. I can do this on stage. And then from that point on, I was in a pursuit to see if I could pull this thing off, take this epic Western and put it into that little space in Anaheim that Brian had. And I told Brian I thought for sure he'd shoot me down, and he said, I love that movie, let's do it. And I was like, damn it, now I have no excuse now. So I got a good friend of mine, Connie Schwab. She watched the movie and typed out every bit of the words and made me the script, and I started cutting it up and figuring it out. And it was very interesting, the process. I mean, at the time, theater, you have a few scenes, and usually it's a unit set. Well, this was multiple locations, like 36 scenes. Today, that doesn't seem like anything. Back then, it was huge. It was like, why would you do something like this? So to me, I loved it. It was a puzzle. I wanted to figure out, if I could pull this off and capture the experience of the motion picture. Some of you I know have told me they haven't seen it tonight. After you see this, maybe you'll watch it to see how it did. But I wanted to make sure I captured that essence. I wanted to see if I could pull it off, and I wanted to see if it was achievable. And that was the environment that Brian Kojak created at Stages, was us to take chances. And then we failed all the time, and it didn't matter. We were all there together, and we had a great time doing it. So there was no overbearing worry that it was going to work or not. I just wanted to try it. But of course, as you get closer to a deadline, you start worrying, right? And I started worrying about all kinds of things. At the same time, the condition of my father was getting worse and worse. So I was taking him to chemo, and all this was going on as we were working the rehearsals. And there were so many magical moments that made this thing come together. And that's when you kind of know a crazy idea might not be so crazy, when all of a sudden the things start falling into place. And that started really with the casting. I had an audition call, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but where Stages was at that time, we didn't have a whole lot of performers that were sticking around. A lot of people were there in the beginning, they kind of gone off and done stuff, and it was hard to find a talent pool. Well, somehow, I think maybe my connection of doing stuff at the college with Crucible and so forth, Craig Dono had a big part of spreading the word. The word got out, and we had our auditions, and all these Fullerton College students showed up. And the one story I want to share about that, I was judging the high school theater fest a couple years before, and they suck, okay? The high school performances. I was a horrible judge. I mean, I was just ruthless, and I should have never been that way. But I was 26 years old, and I'm like, what is this crap? And then there was this one group from El Dorado that came in, and they did the Elephant Man. And there is this young guy, and I was mesmerized. I'm all, who the fuck is this kid? He was amazing. And I was like, wow. I wrote this glowing, like, this guy, holy shit. Well, here we are, jump forward, audition days at Stages. I see actors come through, and then I see the Elephant Man. It was Gavin Carl.
Holy shit!
Thank you. But anyways, I don't want to get choked up, but it might happen. Anyways, so Gavin jumped in there. Gavin was, I think, one of the youngest cast members in the whole show. You were like 18 or 19? Yeah. And I cast him as Yul Brynner.
Oh my God.
You know, it was a quest to try to make the pieces fit, right? And I had all these other wonderful people that came in, like Andrew and I'm sorry if I'm dropping names. Ed, I already had a history with. It was just great. It was magical. The only person I didn't have was the Brit part, which Jim was supposed to play, but he couldn't because of conflicts. So I had to beg Todd Langwell, and he didn't want to do it. I mean, I literally had to try to war him in, but I don't think he regrets it. So we started rehearsing this thing and putting it together. And then I immediately realized my obstacle wasn't so much making this fit in this space. It was getting all these young guys to be men. It was a challenge. They were all just, of a different place in their life. And here I was trying to get him to do Steve McQueen and all these people on stage. And, but I found it was so much fun. It was like, playing, right? So I was getting him up there, becoming gunslingers. I got to share audition notes. Brian, I hope it doesn't humiliate you, but when we were getting ready for rehearsals, Brian came up to me the very first day of rehearsal and said, I've been working on my walk. That is good, because that's what you got to have when you're a gunfighter. And Brian's all, okay, here we go, here we go. That is a cowboy, but that is not the cowboy we're going to do. and Brian, I've worked with him so many times. I love working with him. He's one of the best actors I've ever worked with. And I immediately started diving into it, and he caught on. And when you watch his performance tonight, you're going to see he nailed Steve McQueen. Not that he was supposed to do Steve McQueen at all. They're all doing their own thing, but he had the bravado and the swagger. It's fucking awesome. So those are little moments that kind of happen as we're putting it together. And then the fucking guns. I had to teach them to spin guns, some of them. They were going to do it anyways. Jim bought all these guns. In fact, there's 4 still remaining after 3 years. And I used to tell him, you have to practice over your bed. These things fall in the concrete, they're going to break. All during rehearsal. I would just hear, did it break? Did it break? Like some of them broke. But that was an interesting experience. But then I realized I wanted to do live blanks, and this entered a whole other thing. We had all these big battles in here, and we found that these little blanks they sell at Big Five for starter guns were the perfect thing. Well, I started counting up how many blanks we were going to do a night, and it was ridiculous. It was almost 200 blanks a night. We had theoretically 5 performances, and literally I drove all around Southern California, hitting up every big 5, buying them off their shelves. And I think it was a constant thing every week. Either you, Jim, or I were going out buying these blanks to make sure everybody had them. And those in your cast will remember that was not a fun thing. You mastered those little tiny blanks, and you had to change them multiple times during the show, right? And but they did it, and there's a shit ton of gunpowder going off every night. It was so cool. These are just all these little obstacles. But the biggest challenge I had, and I'm sorry to go on too long, I hope this is interesting shit, but the biggest challenge I had was capturing the music. The score to The Magnificent Seven is one of the most iconic Hollywood scores of all time. It was written by Elmer Bernstein, who's done a ton of stuff. And I fell in love with the score, like everybody else had listened to it. And I was like, okay, we're gonna do the show. And then I started putting the scenes together, and I went, yeah, I remember that track on the record. That's gonna work great there. This is gonna be great. And then as I started going through it, I'm like, I need music for this. That track from the movie's not on the record. So I have to give you visual aid. So this was the only album that had been out in public since 1966. And it has got a total of 12 tracks. And I started going through and putting the music in there. And you guys are gonna see when you see the show tonight, how much the music influences everything in this show. And to me, being a sound designer and loving soundtracks, I was the geek in high school that didn't grab pop music, just bought soundtracks. To me, this was one of the biggest things I wanted to achieve, was underscoring this show, which led to me doing it all this time with all of my shows. It's something I pride myself on, I love, but I didn't have enough material. I was going nuts trying to figure out ways to underscore these scenes. I remember Elmer Bernstein had done the Three Amigos, so I got the Three Amigo track. Polar opposite to what the Magnificent Seven was. I felt so defeated. I was watching the scenes, and we made fun of this. Guys walking around up there with posters, saying these like really dramatic lines. Are you good with that? Pointing at their crotch, it's like, oh yeah, what are we talking about here? I'm good, you want to find out? It's just like, we were laughing at some of this stuff. It was so over the top, right? But I was like, I know it's the music that's gonna pull this all together. Well, it was, I wanna say, maybe the week before we opened, Andy came up to me and said, hey, I got this cassette. And I have gone everywhere. I've bought every version of the Magnificent Seven. No, look at this. You may wanna take a listen to it. I was like, oh man, all right. I popped it into my car because we had cassette players then. And started listening to it, and I'm all, I've never heard this. And then I looked at the inside sleeve. It was the entire score to the movie. It had just been released that day or so.
Yeah.
And it says, so you and I bought this CD because Tower Records was open until midnight. So I went there, I bought this thing, and I cried because I had it. It was amazing. So I had this, and everything was put together. And then that week before we opened, I lost my father, and that was terrible. And there was times when I thought, maybe I just scrap it. Then I was like, that is the most ridiculous thing. This is what I need. This is what we need to do. You got to move on with life, right? You just got to keep going. Everyone was so supportive, and so we did it. We put it together, and we opened it, and it was an event unlike anything I've ever experienced. Changed my life forever. Opened the Maverick, and so on and so on. But this picture right here, I always had, I cherished it. And back in 2000, I had an opportunity to meet Elmer Bernstein, and he autographed it right there.
Wow. Awesome. Free to dance moves.
All right. But I wanted to give you a little background on this whole thing and how it all came together and what it's led to. It's all because of people like you that have been helping me all these years. God, I'm going to start with all of them. Okay, sit back.